Stories making headlines this hour. An alarming sign out of North Korea. Satellite imagery suggests the communist state may have restarted a nuclear reactor capable of producing enough plutonium to make one atomic bomb every year. President Park Geun-hye offers to hold a set of back-to-back talks with rival parties, followed by a three-way meeting with both sides to heal a prolonged political rift. 5 UN powers meet in New York to discuss a Russian plan for placing Syria's chemical weapons under international control. Russia and the U.S. are set to hold key bilateral talks in Geneva on Thursday. Well, these stories and more next on Primetime News. Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Thursday, September 12th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I am Yoo-ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin this evening at the nation's top office. President Park Geun-hye wants to personally step in to help get the National Assembly functioning again.
She offered back-to-back meetings with rival parties to break the ongoing political impasse in Korea's parliament. Our Kim Hyun-ji reports on efforts to get Korea's politicians back to business.
A day after President Park Geun-hye returned home from trips to Russia and Vietnam, the presidential office announced that the president would like to meet with the leaders of the ruling and main opposition parties in order to address any concerns the parties may have. The meeting would take place at the National Assembly and would follow a briefing by the president on the success of her recent overseas trips. The announcement was made a few hours after Central Party floor leader Choi Kyung-hwan and his main opposition Democratic Party counterpart Chun Byung-hun sat down for breakfast Thursday to discuss how the rival parties can go about normalizing parliamentary business. It was the first time the floor leaders had met in 2 months. The National Assembly has remained virtually paralyzed for weeks over stark differences between the parties on the role of the country's spy agency, the National Intelligence Service. The Democratic Party has been demanding the agency be reformed from top to bottom and says the NIS meddled in last year's presidential election through a systematic online smear campaign against the opposition candidates. The Democratic Party has also been demanding that President Park apologize for the election scandal. When a special parliamentary probe into the scandal petered out with no tangible results in early August, the Democratic Party organized street protests, accusing the ruling camp of blocking a meaningful investigation into the matter. The Central Party urged the Democratic Party to end its street protests and return to parliament. Because of the vast bipartisan differences between the parties, urgent issues like this year's budget and measures aimed at reversing a slowing domestic economy have been put on the back burner for weeks. The rival parties now hope to return parliamentary operations to normal before Chuseok, the fall harvest holiday, which starts next Wednesday. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, the ruling party has welcomed the president's proposal for talks, calling on the main opposition party to accept the offer.
The Democratic Party, on the other hand, held back from giving a definite response, saying it will come up with an official position after looking further into the exact intention behind the proposal made by the presidential office, as well as the issues to be discussed. That despite recent signs of improving inter-Korean relations, North Korea may be restarting a nuclear reactor that could produce weapons-grade plutonium.
That's according to satellite imagery that shows steam coming out of a building at the Yongbyon nuclear complex in North Korea. Kim Min-ji has more on the daunting discovery out of the rogue state.
The two Koreas may be back on a path of improving relations, but denuclearization of the Korean peninsula may still be a way off. North Korea appears to have restarted a reactor at its Yongbyon nuclear facility, with new satellite imagery showing white smoke billowing from a building near the reactor. The 5-megawatt reactor was shut down in 2007 under a disarmament agreement signed at the six-party talks. It is capable of producing 6 kilograms of plutonium a year. The findings by the U.S.-Korea Institute at Johns Hopkins School Advanced International Studies were released Wednesday. The institute said the white coloration and volume are consistent with steam being vented because the electrical generating system is about to come online, indicating that the reactor is in or nearing operation. In April, Pyongyang expressed its intent to restart the Yongbyon reactor, and the U.S. institute believes that steady progress has taken place toward that goal since then. It is still unclear, however, whether the reactor is fully operational or in a trial run. The U.S. and other nations are reportedly analyzing the satellite images. Experts have said that the North may be using the reactor as a way to bring Washington back to the negotiating table. However, a spokesman from the U.S. State Department's East Asian and Pacific Affairs Bureau said Wednesday that North Korea's nuclear programs remain a matter of serious concern and reiterated Washington's stance that Pyongyang needs to abide by its commitments and abandon its nuclear activity. North Korea has repeatedly defied international calls to denuclearize and has conducted 3 nuclear tests since 2006. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Japan won the race to host the 2020 Olympic Games, defying growing fears of the country's radiation leaks from the tsunami-crippled nuclear plant and looming doubts about the effects of Abenomics.
While Tokyo's Olympic bid success has come as a morale booster for Japan and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, we delve into how it will affect the country's stagnant economy and its troubled diplomacy with neighboring countries.
We are joined by Dr. Eun Yong-soo, Assistant Professor of Political Science and International Studies at Incheon National University. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me today.
Well, Professor, how did Japan win the Olympic bid when you see Fukushima on the one hand and its stagnant economy on the other, and then also regional tensions?
Well, I think Tokyo had a big advantage over the other candidates, Istanbul and Madrid, in terms of political stability and financial solidarity. Istanbul, for example, had not been able to overcome the concerns about escalating political unrest in the country and the conflict in neighboring Syria as well. And in the case of Madrid, their campaign, which by the way empathized providing reliable and trustworthy Olympics, had not been able to convince the IOC members regarding the ongoing worries about the economy and the recent doping scandals among the country's athletes. So although Japan had its own issue, which is nuclear safety, nevertheless, the other 2 candidate cities had far more serious and worrisome issues and problems, I think.
So will the 2020 Olympic Games be able to bring in the economic boost to Japan, or will it prove to be a financial burden in the long run?
Well, there are some rosy projections that the 2020 Olympics could provide Japan with like 0.7 and 0.8% of GDP growth over the next 7 years or so, and 150,000 jobs will be created. And of course, international mega events such as the Olympics are indeed a good opportunity for countries to invest in their transportation infrastructure and to promote tourism and national image as well. But sometimes this doesn't work in practice. As a matter of fact, a couple of academic studies on the cost and the benefits of the Olympic have found that every single Olympic Games since 1960 has failed to meet the cost target, and that the average overrun has been whopping 179%. So which means most of the cities that hosted the Olympics have lost their money. And on top of that, the Prime Minister, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, made a promise at the presentation given to the IOC members that his government will resolve the Fukushima fiasco by 2020. But most of the nuclear plant experts agree that it will take at least 2 decades from now, and it will take billions and billions of dollars to fix the problem. So I think the actual benefits of the Olympic would be less substantial than expected.
Well, speaking of the Abe government, do you think this Olympic win will make him a bit overconfident, and do you think that will spill over into relations with his regional neighbors?
Well, certainly the psychological boost of political confidence can come from the successful bid for the Olympics. And this could lead the Abe administration to push nationalism further. Tokyo and Japan, as the host country and city of the 2020 Olympics, must stop making escalating tensions and conflicts with neighboring countries over territorial and historical issues. But at the same time, South Korea and China, as mature and civilized countries, need to refrain from making sort of a nationalistic responses to Japanese politicians, because the majority of the Japanese people are not buying the arguments made by some of the ultra-right-wing politicians in Japan.
Professor, the Games are just 7 years away. Now, that's not a long time. Will Japan be able to get everything in place?
Well, again, what is critical here is whether or not the Abe administration can really resolve the Fukushima fiasco by 2020. So although I wish for the best, but the Abe administration and Japan has a long way to go and a rough road ahead.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Professor, for sharing your insights with us tonight.
Thank you for having me today. Thank you.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features
is on the rise.
closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature, circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report. Less than
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Came on the news. We're trying to cover up the South. As the bloody conflict in Syria rages on, envoys from the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council have met to discuss Russia's plans to put Syria's chemical weapons under international control. Now, meanwhile, the foreign ministers of the U.S. and Russia, who are at odds over the Syria crisis, are set to start their 2 days of talks in Geneva on Thursday. Park Geun-hye reports.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov are to begin their talks in Geneva later on Thursday about Russia's proposal to place Syria's chemical weapons under international supervision.
In Geneva, we agreed, first of all, to discuss the initiative which got wide support in the world, to agree to place Syrian chemical weapons arsenals under international supervision, understanding that this would allow for banning the use of military force against the Syrian Arab Republic.
The talks are expected to continue for at least 2 days. During Kerry's stay in Geneva, he's also scheduled to meet with UN Arab League Special Envoy on Syria, Lakhdar Brahimi, to further discuss ways to resolve the Syrian crisis. The talks come 1 day after the 5 permanent member countries of the UN Security Council met in New York Wednesday to discuss the Syrian matter. The envoys of the U.S., Russia, Britain, France, and China held a closed-door meeting where they discussed a resolution drafted by France. According to various media reports, France's draft resolution would give the Syrian government 15 days to declare their total stock of chemical weapons and give them up or face punitive measures. Russia is known to have voiced its opposition to the plan. Syria's longtime ally Russia has been firm in its stance against any military strikes on the Syrian regime. In a rare move, Russian President Vladimir Putin wrote an op-ed piece for the New York Times on Wednesday and said the U.S. military intervention will lead to confusion in an already violence-stricken country. Park Geun-hye, Arirang News.
Now, Apple is on the ropes after the release of rather underwhelming new iPhone models, which failed to live up to expectations both in terms of price and hardware. The company's shares tumbled 5.4% Wednesday to just over $470 US. Apple's new iPhone 5S and the cheaper multicolored iPhone 5C have drawn mixed to negative reviews from consumers and investors alike. Analysts say the 5C could be too expensive to spark a significant expansion into lower-end but extremely lucrative to markets like China and India. The 5C will have a retail price of $730 in China, more than the average monthly wage of a salaried worker in most Chinese cities.
Back here in the country, for the fourth straight month, the Bank of Korea left its key interest rate unchanged with just a week to go before the U.S. Federal Reserve is widely expected to announce a scale back of its stimulus program. Arirang's economics correspondent Park Geun-hye has the details.
Korea's central bank kept its wait-and-see stance for the fourth straight month in September, holding its key interest rate steady at 2.5%. Following its monthly monetary policy meeting on Thursday, the Bank of Korea said the local and global economies will stay on the path of moderate recovery in the coming months.
The central bank has given a 3.7% growth outlook for the second half of this year and a 4% growth forecast for next year. Current economic conditions are changing within our forecast, so we'll stick with our outlook for the time being.
With the Fed poised to start winding down its $85 billion a month bond buying program sometime soon, the governor said Korean policymakers will have to make sure the local economy won't be hit by possible capital outflows. Already emerging economies such as India and Indonesia have suffered from sharp currency depreciation on speculation of the U.S. Fed announcement.
If the Fed pulling back from its stimulus programs prompts capital flight in only a handful of emerging markets, the risk to the Korean economy won't be that substantial. But if foreign investors pull out from all emerging markets, the impact on the economy will be huge.
With Korean policymakers mindful of negative impacts from the planned reduction of the U.S. Federal Reserve's stimulus programs, many analysts expect the central bank to keep its interest rate unchanged for the rest of the year. Park Geun-hye, Arirang News.
With Korea's 5-day Thanksgiving or Chuseok holiday fast approaching, postal workers are scrambling to make sure gift sets and other presents make it to their destinations on time. Our Song Ji-sun went to the biggest sorting center in the country to see how our holiday mail travels through the system.
Tens of millions of Koreans will head to their hometowns to gather with their families next week, but a gesture of their love often arrives before they do. Trucks full of boxes from central and eastern Seoul arrive as the sun sets, and the boxes are put onto the conveyor belt. Each box is scanned and put onto designated trays, which move 150 meters per minute, to be dropped at their destination lane, all in less than 3 minutes after being taken off the truck.
At this busiest time of the year, over 1 million packages are delivered each day nationwide, and up to 2 million packages are checked in each day. Now that's the triple the amount of a regular day.
For the 2 weeks before the Chuseok holiday arrives, the state-run Korea Post estimates that 13 million packages will have been delivered around the nation. That will be the highest it's ever been, up 16% from last year's Chuseok. To have them delivered on time, part-timers are recruited in mass numbers. Even administrative office workers all called in to fill in the hours in between.
Around 60 people work on a shift, but we have an extra 120 working these days. Office workers temporarily fill in the remaining hours of the workers here. It's greatly needed because we usually get 150,000 packages a day, and we get twice that amount this time of the year.
So what's the most challenging part of handling so many holiday gift boxes? This woman, who's worked here for 6 years, says extra stamina is a must on these intense days.
For Chuseok deliveries, the boxes are bigger and heavier, full of ripe fruits and gifts. I'd say it's about 5 times tougher than regular days, and my back hurts after lifting these boxes every night.
The work continues around the clock overnight, and the boxes will leave the mail center en route to their final destinations at the crack of dawn. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
And one of the biggest broadcasting trade shows is well underway here in Seoul, where thousands of media buyers and major stations from around the globe are seizing the opportunity to trade media content. Our Kim Hyun-bin brings us this report from the convention floor.
Where can foreign broadcasters get their hands on the latest hit TV shows from Asia? At Broadcast Worldwide 2013, a major broadcast industry trade show hosted by the Ministry of Culture and Tourism, that runs for 3 days until Friday.
This is the 13th broadcast worldwide convention. The event is considered a hub for Asian content, allowing buyers and sellers from around the globe to exchange, purchase, and sell the superb content from their countries.
Over 170 major domestic and international broadcasters are here to promote and sell their hottest products.
Like other broadcasters at this market, we want to promote our channel, which is Korea's only all-English international channel. And I want to promote and sell our cultural programs, documentaries, and entertainment shows to the foreign buyers.
Dramas, variety shows, and music programs from Korea have a large following in Asia and are particularly popular here.
I'm a representative of a Chinese broadcaster. I'm here because we think the Korean entertainment TV shows are quite famous and very popular. I'm here to seek any potential possibilities to have some cooperation and co-production.
Last year's convention hit a record high in sales, with roughly $40 million changing hands. And this year's convention is expected to facilitate even higher sales figures. Over 1,500 buyers from 50 countries are here at this year's convention. Since its inception in 2001, sales have jumped sevenfold, making Korea the biggest broadcasting content market in Asia. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
The South Korean men's national football team has been less than successful in recent weeks, and their new spot in the FIFA World Rankings reflects that.
And Stephen Che joins us from the Sports Center to give us the analysis. Stephen.
Hey guys, after a lackluster month, South Korea fell 2 spots to 58th in the world rankings for this month with 574 points. Their month included a 0-0 draw with Peru, a 4-1 win against Haiti, and most recently a 2-1 loss to Croatia. On the other hand, Spain topped the global list, followed by Argentina and Germany. Looking at the rankings by region, Japan, Iran, Australia, and Uzbekistan came ahead of the ROK. Meanwhile, the South Korean team will take on Brazil and Mali in more friendlies in October, ahead of the World Cup next year. Heading to Major League Baseball, LA Dodgers pitcher Ryu Hyun-jin took the mound against the Arizona Diamondbacks on Wednesday evening in the U.S., seeking his 14th win of the season. Instead, the lofty lefty picked up his 6th loss. Ryu started the game with 3 singles and ended the first inning having given up 2 runs. He conceded 1 more in the next inning before cruising to his 20th quality start. 26-year-old gave up 3 earned runs on 10 hits in 6 innings of work, putting up no walks and just 1 strikeout, his lowest K count of the year. And finally, it's time for Thursday's top KBO matchup. The Kia Tigers and the LG Twins clashed in Seoul. Tigers coming off a win, the Twins back after 2 canceled games. Now LG starts off hot. Lee Jin-young hits 1 home in the first, and then in the second clears the loaded bases with this triple. It's 4-0 Twins. The Tigers get 1 back in the third, then in the fifth, LG's both Lee Byung-gyu's 5th and 7th in the lineup combined to bring in 3, 8-1 LG. The Tigers tack on some more, but the Twins go on to win this one with final score of 11-3. And looking at the scores from around the league, Hanwha defeats NC 8-5, Lotte over Samsung 1-0, and Tusan defeats SK 9-7. Now that does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
Let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center for the latest forecast. Hello, Bo-kyung.
Hello, Sean and Chi-hye. It looks like you're going to need an umbrella tomorrow.
Right, I hear there will be more rain throughout the nation. Can you give us the details?
Sure. Let's take a look at the satellite map for details. The nation will gradually be under the influence of a low pressure trough from the west. This is why we're seeing cloudy skies and sporadic rain throughout the nation. Tomorrow, there's heavy rain in the forecast in the central regions. In fact, in some regions, there may be over 30 millimeters of rain per hour. Other than that, tomorrow should be a cloudy day with sporadic showers elsewhere in the nation. Now, taking a closer look at the forecast, in Seoul, it should be a rainy day with a daytime high of 24 degrees. Meanwhile, down south, there should be sporadic showers in the afternoon with a high in the high 20s. Now, moving on to other regions, Daejeon and Jeju should make it to 26 and 29 degrees respectively. Meanwhile, it should also rain on Mount Kumgang with a daytime high of 16 degrees. Well, that's all for now, but join me for another update after midnight.
And that's our broadcast on this Thursday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening. We'll see you soon.